Section 10 of the Perfumed Garden by Sheikh Nefzaoui, translated by Richard Burton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Alia Makki. Chapter 12. Concerning sundry observations useful to know for men and women. Know, O Vizier, to whom God be good, that the information contained in this chapter is of the greatest utility, and it is only in this book that such can be found. Assuredly, to know things is better than to be ignorant of them. Knowledge may be bad, but ignorance is still more so. The knowledge in question concerns matters unknown to you and relating to women. There was once a woman named Ma'arbada, who was considered to be the most knowing and the wisest person of her time. She was a philosopher. One day various questions were put to her, and among them the following, which I shall give here with her answers. In what part of a woman's body does her mind reside? Between her thighs. And where her enjoyment? In the same place. And where the love of men and the hatred of them? In the vulva, she said, adding, to the man whom we love we give our vulva, and we refuse it to him we hate. We share our property with the man we love, and are content with whatever little he may be able to bring to us. If he has no fortune, we take him as he is. But on the other hand, we keep at a distance him whom we hate, were he to offer us wealth and riches. Where in a woman are located knowledge, love, and taste? In the eye, the heart, and the vulva. When asked for explanations on this subject, she replied, knowledge dwells in the eye, for it is the woman's eyes that appreciates the beauty of form and appearance. By the medium of this organ, love penetrates into the heart and dwells in it and enslaves it. A woman in love pursues the object of her love and lays snares for it. If she succeed, there will be an encounter between the beloved one and her vulva. The vulva tastes him, and then knows his sweet or bitter flavor. It is in fact the vulva which knows how to distinguish, by tasting, the good from the bad. Which virile member are preferred by women? What women are most eager for coitus, and which are those who detest it? Which are the men preferred by women, and which are those whom they abominate? She answered, not all women have the same conformation of vulva, and they also differ in their manner of making love, and in their love for and their aversion to things. The same disparities exist in men, both with regard to their organs and their tastes. A woman of plump form and with a shallow uterus will look out for a member which is both short and thick, which will completely fill her vagina without touching the bottom of it. A long and a large member would not suit her. A woman with a deep-lying uterus and consequently a long vagina only yearns for a member which is long and thick and of ample proportions, and thus fills her vagina in its whole extensions. She will despise the man with a small and slender member, for he could never satisfy her in coition. The following distinctions exist in the temperaments of women: the bilious, the melancholy, the sanguine, the phlegmatic, and the mixed. Those with a bilious or melancholy temperament are not much given to coitus, and like it only with men of the same disposition. Those who are sanguine or phlegmatic love coition to excess, and if they encounter a member, they would never let it leave their vulva if they could help it. With these also it is only men of their own temperament who can satisfy them, and if such a woman were married to a bilious or melancholy man, they would lead a sorry life together. As regards to mixed temperaments, they exhibit neither marked predilection for nor aversion against coitus. It has been observed that under all circumstances, little women love coitus more and evince a stronger affection for the virile member than women of a large size. Only long and vigorous members suit them. In them they find the delight of their existence and of their couch. There are also women who love the coitus only on the edge of their vulva, and when a man lying upon them wants to take his member into the vagina, they take it out with the hand and place its gland between the lips of the vulva. I have every reason to believe that this is only the case with young girls, or with women not used to men. I pray God to preserve us from such, or from women for whom it is a matter of impossibility to give themselves up to men. There are women who will do their husbands' behest, and will satisfy them and give them voluptuous pleasure by coition, only if compelled by blows and ill treatment. Some people ascribe this conduct to the aversion they feel against coition or against the husband, but this is not so. It is simply a question of temperament and character. There are also women who do not care for coition because all their ideas turn upon the grandeurs, personal honors, ambitious hopes, or business cares of the world. With others this indifference springs, as it may be, from purity of the heart, or from jealousy, or from pronounced tendency of their souls towards another world, or lastly from past violent sorrows. Furthermore, the pleasure which they feel in coition depends not alone upon the size of the member, but also upon the particular conformation of their own natural parts. Among those the vulva called from its form, al-murabba', or the square one, and al-muraffa', the projecting, is remarkable. This vulva has the peculiarity of projecting all around. When the woman is standing up and closes her thighs, it burns for coitus. Its slit is narrow, and it is called the kalihimi, or the pressed one. The woman who has such a one likes only large members, and they must not let her wait long for the crisis. But this is a general characteristic of women. As to the desire of men for coition, I must say that they are also addicted to it more or less according to their different temperaments, which are 5 in number, like the women's, with the difference that the hankering of the woman after the member is stronger than that of the man after the vulva. What are the faults of women? Mu'arbada replied to this question: the worst of women is she who immediately cries out loud as soon as her husband wants to touch the smallest amount of her property for his necessities. In the same line stands she who divulges matters which her husband wants to be kept secret. Are there any more? She is asked. She adds, the woman of a jealous disposition, and the woman who raises her voice so as to drown that of her husband. She who disseminates scandals, the woman that scowls, the one who is always burning to let men see her beauty and cannot stay at home. And with respect to this last, let me add that a woman who laughs much and is constantly seen at the street door may be taken to be an arrant prostitute. Bad also are those women who mind people's affairs, those who are always complaining, those who steal things belonging to their husbands, those of a disagreeable and imperious temper, those who are not grateful for the kindnesses received, those that will not share the conjugal couch, or incommode their husbands by the uncomfortable positions they take in it, those who are inclined to deceit, treachery, calumny, and ruse. Then there are still women who are unlucky in whatever they undertake, those who are always inclined to blame and censure, those who invite their husbands to fulfill their conjugal duty only when it is convenient for them, those that make noises in bed, and lastly, those who are shameless, without intelligence, tattlers, and curious. Here you have the worst specimens amongst women. End of chapter 12. Chapter 13. Concerning the causes of enjoyment in the act of generation. Know, O Vizier, to whom God be good, that the causes which tend to develop the passion for coition are 6 in number: the fire of an ardent love, the superabundance of sperm, the proximity of the loved person whose possession is eagerly desired, the beauty of the face, exciting viands and contact. Know also that the causes of the pleasure in cohabitation and the conditions of enjoyment are numerous, but that the principal and the best ones are the heat of the vulva, the narrowness, dryness, and sweet exhalation of the same. If any one of these conditions is absent, there is at the same time something wanting in the voluptuous enjoyment. But if the vagina unites the required qualifications, the enjoyment is complete. In fact, a moist vulva relaxes the nerves, a cold one robs the member of all its vigor, and bad exhalations from the vagina detract greatly from the pleasure, as is also the case if the latter is very wide. The acme of enjoyment, which is produced by the abundance and impetuous ejaculation of the sperm, depends upon one circumstance, and this is that the vulva is furnished with a suction pump, or orifice of the uterus, which will clasp the virile member and suck up the sperm with an irresistible force. The member once seized by the orifice, the lover is powerless to retain the sperm, for the orifice will not relax its hold until it has extracted every drop of the sperm, and certainly if the crisis arrives before this gripping of the gland takes place, the pleasure of the ejaculation will not be complete. Know that there are 8 things which give strength to and favor the ejaculation. These are bodily health, the absence of all care and worry, an unembarrassed mind, natural gaiety of spirit, good nourishment, wealth, the variety of the faces of women, and the variety of their complexions. If you wish to acquire strength for coitus, take fruit of the mastic tree, or dir, pound them and macerate them with oil and honey, then drink of the liquid first thing in the morning. You will thus become vigorous for coitus, and there will be abundance of sperm produced. The same result will be obtained by rubbing the virile member and the vulva with gall from the jackal. This rubbing stimulates those parts and increases their vigor. A savant named Al-Gelinos has said, "He who feels that he is weak for coition should drink before going to bed a glassful of very thick honey, and eat 20 almonds and 100 grains of the pine tree. He must follow this regime for 3 days. He may also pound onion seed, sift it, and mix it afterwards with honey, stirring the mixture well, and take of this mixture while still fasting." A man who would wish to acquire vigor for coition may likewise melt down fat from the hump of a camel, and rub his member with it just before the act. It will then perform wonders, and the woman will praise it for its work. If you would make the enjoyment still more voluptuous, masticate a little cube of pepper or cardamom grains of the large species, put a certain quantity of it upon the head of your member, and then go to work. This will procure for you, as well as for the woman, a matchless enjoyment. The ointment from the balm of the Judea or of Mecca produces a similar effect. If you would make yourself very strong for coitus, pound very carefully prether together with ginger. Mix them while pounding with ointment of lilac. Then rub with this compound your abdomen, the testicles, and the verge. This will make you ardent for coitus. You will likewise predispose yourself for cohabitation, sensibly increasing the volume of your sperm, gain increased vigor for the action, and procure for yourself extraordinary erections by eating of chrysocolla the size of a mustard grain. This excitement resulting from the use of this nostrum is unparalleled. If you wish the woman to be inspired with a great desire to cohabit with you, take a little of cubebs, perither, ginger, and cinnamon, which you will have to masticate just before joining her. Then moisten your member with your saliva, and do her business for her. From that moment she will have such an affection for you, and she can scarcely be a moment without you. A virile member, rubbed with ass's milk, will become uncommonly strong and vigorous. Green peas, boiled carefully with onions, and powdered with cinnamon, ginger, and cardamoms, well pounded, create for the consumer considerable amorous passion and strength in coitus. End of chapter 13. End of section 10. Section 11 of the Perfumed Garden by Sheikh Nefzaoui, translated by Richard Burton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Ali Makki. Chapter 14. Description of the uterus of sterile women, and the treatment of the same. Know, O Vizier, God be good to you, that wise physicians have plunged into this sea of difficulties to very little purpose. Each one has looked at the matter from his own point of view, and in the end the question has been left in the dark. Amongst the causes which determine the sterility of women may be taken the obstruction of the uterus by clots of blood, the accumulation of water, the want of or defective sperm of the man, organic malformations of the parts of the latter, internal defects in the uterus, the stagnation of the process, the habitual presence of fluid in the uterus. Other savants attribute the sterility of women to the action of spirits and spells. Sterility is common in women who are very corpulent, so that their uterus gets compressed and cannot conceive, not only being able to take up the sperm, especially if the husband's member is short and his testicles are very fat. In such a case, the act of copulation can only be imperfectly completed. One of the remedies against sterility consists of the marrow from the hump of a camel, which the woman spreads on a piece of linen, and wipes her sexual parts with, after having been purified subsequently to her courses. To complete the cure, she takes some fruits of the plant called jackal's grapes, squeezes the juice out of them into a vase, and then adds a little vinegar. Of this medicine she drinks, fasting for 7 days, during which time her husband will take care to have copulation with her. The woman may besides pound a small quantity of sesame grain and mix its juice with the bean's weight of sandarak powder. Of this mixture she drinks during 3 days after her periods. She is then fit to receive her husband's embraces. The first of these beverages is to be taken separately, and in the first instance, after this the second, which will have salutary effect, if so it pleases Almighty God. There is still another remedy. A mixture is made of niter, gall from a sheep or cow, a small quantity of the plant named al-misk, and of the grains of that plant. The woman saturates a plug of soft wool with this mixture, and rubs her vulva with it after menstruation. She then receives the caresses of her husband, and, with the will of God the highest, will become pregnant. End of chapter 14. Chapter 15. Concerning the causes of impotence in men. Know, O Vizier, God be with you, that there are men whose sperm is vitiated by the inborn coldness of their nature, by diseases of their organs, by purulent discharges, and by fevers. Urinary canal. There are also men with a urinary canal in their verge deviating, owing to a downward curve. The result of such conformation is that the seminal liquid cannot be ejected in a straight direction, but falls downwards. Other men have the member too short or too small to reach the neck of the matrix, or their bladder is ulcerated, or they are affected by other mixtures which prevent them from coition. Finally, there are men who arrive quicker at crisis than the woman, in consequence of which the two emissions are not simultaneous. There is in such case no conception. All these circumstances serve to explain the absence of conception in women, but the principal cause of all is the shortness of the virile member. As another cause of impotence may be regarded the sudden transmission from hot to cold, and vice versa, and a great number of analogous reasons. Men whose impotence is due either to the corruption of their sperm owing to their cold nature, or to maladies of the organs, or to discharges or fevers and similar ills, or to their excessive promptness in ejaculation, can be cured. They should eat stimulant pastry containing honey, ginger, pirither, syrup of vinegar, hellebore, garlic, cinnamon, nutmeg, cardamom, sparrow's tongues, Chinese cinnamon, long pepper, and other spices. They will be cured by using them. As to the other afflictions which we have indicated, the curvature of the urethra, the small dimensions of the virile member, the ulcers on the bladder, and the other infirmities which are adverse to coition, God only can cure them. End of chapter 15. Chapter 16. Undoing of aiguillettes, or impotence for a time. Know, O Vizier, God be good to you, that impotence arises from 3 causes. Firstly, from the tying of the aiguillettes; secondly, from a feeble and relaxed constitution; and thirdly, from too premature ejaculation. To cure the tying of aiguillettes, you must take kalanga, cinnamon from Mecca, cloves, India cachu, nutmeg, Indian cubebs, sparrowwort, cinnamon, Persian pepper, Indian thistle, cardamoms, pirither, laurel seed, and gilliflowers. All these ingredients must be pounded together carefully, and one drinks of it as much as one can, morning and night, in broth, particularly in pigeon broth. Fowl broth may, however, be substituted just as well. Water is to be drunk before and after taking it. The compound may likewise be taken with honey, which is the best method, and gives the best results. The man whose ejaculation is too precipitate must take nutmeg and incense or oliban mixed together with honey. If the impotence arises from weakness, the following ingredients are to be taken in honey, viz., pirither, nettle seed, a little spurge or cavadil, ginger, cinnamon of Mecca, and cardamom. This preparation will cause the weakness to disappear and effect the cure, with the permission of God the Highest. I can warrant the efficacy of all these preparations, the virtue of which has been tested. The impossibility of performing the coitus owing to the absence of stiffness in the member is also due to other causes. It will happen, for instance, that a man with his virgin erection will find it getting flaccid just when he is on the point of introducing it between the thighs of the woman. He thinks this is impotence, whilst it is simply the result, maybe, of an exaggerated respect for the woman, maybe of a misplaced bashfulness, maybe because one has observed something disagreeable, or on account of an unpleasant odor. Finally, owing to a feeling of jealousy inspired by the reflection that the woman is no longer a virgin and has served the pleasure of other men. End of chapter 16. Chapter 17. Prescriptions for increasing the dimensions of small members and for making them splendid. Know, O Vizier, God be good to you, that this chapter, which treats of the size of the virile member, is of the first importance for both men and women. For the men, because from a good-sized and vigorous member there springs the affection and love of women; for the women, because it is by such members that their amorous passions are appeased, and the greatest pleasure is procured for them. This is evident from the fact that many men, solely by reason of their insignificant members, are, as far as coition is concerned, objects of aversion to women, who likewise entertain the same sentiments with regard to those whose members are soft, nerveless, and relaxed. Their whole happiness consists in the use of robust and strong members. A man, therefore, with a small member who wants to make it grand, or fortify it for the coitus, must rub it before copulation with tepid water, until it gets red and extended by the blood flowing into it. In consequence of the heat, he must then anoint it with a mixture of honey and ginger, rubbing it in sedulously. Then let him join the woman. He will procure for her such pleasure that she objects to getting him off her again. Another remedy consists in a compound made of a moderate quantity of pepper, lavender, galanga, and musk, reduced to powder, sifted, and mixed up with honey and preserved ginger. The member, after having first washed in warm water, is then vigorously rubbed with the mixture. It will then grow large and brawny, and afford to the woman a marvellous feeling of voluptuousness. A third remedy is the following. Wash the member in water until it becomes red, and enters into erection. Then take a piece of soft leather, upon which spread hot pitch, and envelope the member with it. It will not be long before the member rises its head, trembling with a passion. The leather is to be left on until the pitch grows cold, and the member is again in a state of repose. This operation, several times repeated, will have the effect of making the member strong and thick. A fourth remedy is based upon the use of leeches, but only if such is alive in water. You put as many of them into a bottle as can be got in, and fill it up with oil. Then expose the bottle to the sun until the heat of the same has effected a complete mixture. With the fluid thus obtained, the member is to be rubbed several consecutive days, and it will, being by thus treated, become of a good size and of full dimensions. For another procedure I will here note the use of an ass's member. Procure one and boil it together with onions and a large quantity of corn. With this dish feed fowls, which you eat afterwards. One can also macerate the ass's verge in oil, and use the fluid thus obtained for anointing one's member and drinking of it. Another way is to bruise leeches with oil and rub the verge with this ointment, or if it's preferred, the leeches may be put into a bottle and thus enclosed, buried in a warm dunghill until they are dissolved into a coherent mass and form a sort of liniment, which is used for repeatedly anointing the member. The member is certainly greatly to benefit by this. It may likewise take a rosin and wax, mixed with tubipor, asphodel, and cobbler's glue, with which mixture rub the member, and the result will be that its dimensions will be enlarged. The efficacy of all these remedies is well known, and I have tested them. End of chapter 17. End of section 11. Section 12 of the Perfumed Garden by Sheikh Nefzaoui, translated by Richard Burton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Alia Makki. Chapter 18 of things that take away the bad smell from the armpit and sexual parts of women and contract the latter. Know, O Vizier, God be good to you, that bad exhalations from the vulva and from the armpits are, as is also a wide vagina, the greatest of evils. If a woman wants this bad odor to disappear, she must pound red myrrh, then sift it and knead this powder with myrtle water, and rub her sexual parts with this wash. All disagreeable emanation will disappear from her vulva. Another remedy is obtained by pounding lavender and kneading it afterwards with musk rose water. Saturate a piece of woolen stuff with it and rub the vulva with the same until it is hot. The bad smell will be removed by this. If a woman intends to contract her vagina, she has only to dissolve alum in water and wash her sexual parts in the solution, which may be made still more efficacious by the adding of a little bark of the walnut tree, the latter substance being very astringent. Another remedy to be mentioned is the following, which is well known for its efficacy. Boil water in carobs or locusts, freed from their kernels, and bark of the pomegranate tree. The woman sits in a bath with the decoction thus obtained, which must be as hot as she can bear it. When the bath gets cold, it must be warmed and used again, and this immersion is to be repeated several times. The same result may be obtained by fumigating the vulva with cow dung. To do away with bad smell of armpits, one takes antimony and mastic, which are to be pounded together and put with water into an earthen vase. The mixture is then rubbed against the sides of the vase until it turns red. When it is ready for use, rub it into the armpits and the bad smell will be removed. It must be used repeatedly until a radical cure is effected. The same result may be arrived at by pounding together antimony or hadida and mastic, setting the mixture afterwards onto a stove over a low fire until it is of the consistency of bread, and rubbing the residue with a stone until the pellicle which will have formed is removed. Then rub it into the armpits and you may be sure that the bad smell will soon be gone. End of chapter 18. Chapter 19. Instructions with regard to pregnancy and how the gender of the child that is to be born may be known, that is to say, knowledge of the sex of the fetus. Know, O Vizier, God be good to you, that the certain indications of pregnancy are the following: the dryness of the vulva immediately after coitus, the inclination to stretch herself, accesses of somnolency, heavy and profound sleep, the frequent contraction of the opening of the vulva to such an extent that not even a marud could enter, the nipples of the breast becoming darker, and lastly, the most certain of all marks is the cessation of menstruation. If the woman remains always in good health from the time that her pregnancy is certain, if she preserves the good looks of her face and a clear complexion, if she does not become freckled, then it may be taken as a sign that the child will be a boy. The color of the nipples also points to a child of the male sex. The strong development of the breast and bleeding from the nose, if it comes from the right nostrils, are signs of the same purport. The signs pointing to conception of a child of the female sex are numerous. I will name them here. Frequent indisposition during pregnancy, pale complexion, spots and freckles, pains in the matrix, frequent nightmares, blackness of the nipples, a heavy bleeding on the left side, nasal hemorrhage on the same side. If there is any doubt about the pregnancy, let the woman drink on going to bed honey water, and if she has a feeling of heaviness in the abdomen, it is a proof that she is with child. If the right side feels heavier than the left one, it will be a boy. If the breasts are swelling with milk, this is similarly a sign that the child she is bearing will be of the male sex. I have received this information from savants, and all the indications are positive and tested. End of chapter 19. End of section 12. Section 13 of the Perfumed Garden by Sheikh Nefzaoui, translated by Richard Burton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Alia Makki. Chapter 20. forming the conclusion of this work and treating of the good effect of the dilution of eggs as favorable to the coitus. Now, O Vizier, God be good to you, that this chapter contains the most useful instructions how to increase the intensity of the coitus, and that the latter part is profitable to read for an old man as well as for the man in his best years and for the young man. The Sheikh, who gives good advice to the creatures of God the Great, the sage, the savant, the first of the men of his time, speaks as follows on this subject. Listen then to his words. He who takes it a practice to eat every day fasting the yolks of eggs without the white part will find in this aliment an energetic stimulant towards coitus. The same is the case with a man who during 3 days eats of the same mixture with onions. He who boils asparagus and then fries them in fat and then pours upon them the yolks of eggs with pounded condiments and eats every day of this dish will grow very strong for the coitus and find in it a stimulant for his amorous desires. He who peels onions, puts them into a saucepan with condiments and aromatic substances, and fries the mixture with oil and yolks of eggs, will acquire a surpassing and invaluable vigor for the coitus if he will partake of this dish for several days. Camel's milk mixed with honey and taken regularly develops a vigor for copulation which is unaccountable and causes the virile member to be on the alert night and day. He who for several days makes his meals upon eggs boiled with myrrh, core, cinnamon, and pepper will find his vigor with respect to coition and erection greatly increased. He will have a feeling as though his member would never return to the state of repose. A man who wishes to copulate during a whole night and whose desire having come on suddenly will not allow him to prepare himself and follow the regimen just mentioned may have to recourse to the following recipe. He must get a great number of eggs so that he may eat surfeit and fry them with fresh fat and butter. When done, he immerses them in honey, working the whole mass together. He must then eat of them as much as possible with a little bread, and he may be certain that for the whole night his member will not give him any rest. On this subject the following verses have been composed. The member of Abul Hayluj has remained erect for 30 days without a break, because he did eat onions. Abul Hayja has deflowered in one night once 80 virgins, and he did not eat or drink between, because he surfeited himself first with chickpeas and had drunk camel's milk with honey mixed. Maymun the Negro never ceased to spend his sperm, while he for 50 days without a truce the game was working. How proud was he to finish such a task! For 10 days more he worked it, not was he yet surfeited, but all this time he ate but yolk of eggs and bread. The deeds of Abul Hayluj, Abul Hayja, and Maymun just cited have been justly praised, and their history is truly marvelous. So I will make you acquainted with it, please God, and thus complete the signal services which this work is designed to render to humanity. The history of Zahra. The Sheikh, the protector of religion, God the highest be good to him, records that there lived once in a remote antiquity an illustrious king who had numerous armies and immense riches. This king had 7 daughters, remarkable for their beauty and perfections. These 7 had been born one after another without any male infant between them. The king of the time wanted them in marriage, but they refused to be married. They wore men's clothing, rode on magnificent horses covered with gold embroidered trappings, knew how to handle the sword and the spear, and bore men down in single combat. Each of them possessed a splendid palace with the servants and slaves necessary for such service, for the preparation of meat and drink and other necessities of that kind. Whenever a marriage offer for one of them was presented to the king, he never failed to consult with her about it, but they always answered, "That shall never be." Different conclusions were drawn from these refusals, some in a good sense, some in a bad one. For a long time no positive information could be gathered of the reason for this conduct, and the daughters persevered in acting in the same manner until the death of their father. Then the oldest of them was called upon to succeed him, and receive the oath of fidelity from all his subjects. This accession to the throne resounded through all the countries. The name of the eldest was Fawz al-Jamal, the flower of beauty. The second was Sultanat al-Aqmar, the queen of the moons. The third Badi'at al-Jamal, the incomparable in beauty. The fourth al-Warda, the rose. The fifth Mahmuda, the praiseworthy. The sixth al-Kamila, the perfect. And finally the seventh, Zahra, the beauty. Zahra, the youngest, was at that same time the most intelligent and judicious. She was passionately fond of the chase, and one day as she was riding through the fields, she met on her way a cavalier who saluted her, and she returned his salute. She had some 20 men in her service with her. The cavalier thought it was the voice of a woman he had heard, but Zahra's face was covered by a flap of her haik, and he was not certain, and said to himself, I would like to know whether this is a woman or a man. He asked one of the princess's servants, who dissipated his doubts. Approaching Zahra, he then conversed pleasantly with her until they made a halt for breakfast. He sat down near her to partake of the repast. Disappointing the hopes of the cavalier, the princess did not uncover her face, and, pleading that she was fasting, ate nothing. He could not help admiring secretly her hand, the gracefulness of her waist, and the amorous expression of her eyes. His heart was seized with a violent love. The following conversation took place between them. The cavalier: Is your heart insensible for friendship? Zahra: It is not proper for a man to feel friendship for a woman, for it is their hearts once inclined towards each other, libidinous desires will soon invade them, and with Satan inciting them to do wrong, their fall is soon known by everyone. The cavalier: It is not so, when the affection is true, and their intercourse pure, without infidelity or treachery. Zahra: If a woman gives way to the affection she feels for a man, she becomes an object of slander in the whole world, and of general contempt, whence nothing arises but trouble and regret. The cavalier: But our love will remain secret, and in this retired spot, which may serve us as our place of meeting, we shall have intercourse together unknown to all. Zahra: That may not be. Besides, it could not so easily be done. We should soon be suspected, and the eyes of the whole world would be turned upon us. The cavalier: But love is the source of life, the happiness that is, the meeting, the embraces, the caresses of love, the sacrifice of the fortune, and even of the life for your love. Zahra: These words are impregnated with love, and your smile is seductive, but you would do better to refrain from similar conversation. The cavalier: Your word is emerald, and your counsels are sincere, but love has now taken root in my heart, and no one is able to tear it out. If you drive me away from you, I shall assuredly die. Zahra: For all that you must return to your place, and I to mine. If it pleases God, we shall meet again. Then they separated, bidding each other adieu, and returned each of them to their dwelling. The cavalier's name was Abul Hayja. His father, Qairun, was a great merchant and immensely rich, whose habitation stood isolated between the estate of the princess, a day's journey distant from her castle. Abul Hayja returned home, could not rest, and put again his tamur when the night fell, took a black turban, and buckled his sword under his tamur. Then he mounted his horse, and accompanied by his favourite negro Maymun, he rode away secretly under the cover of the night. They travelled all night without stopping, until, on the approach of daylight, the dawn came upon them in sight of Zahra's castle. Then they made a halt among the hills, and entered with their horses into a cavern, which they found there. Abul Hayja left the negro in charge of the horses, and went in the direction of the castle, in order to examine its approaches. He found it surrounded by a very high wall. Not being able to get into it, he retired to some distance to watch those who came out. But the whole day passed away, and he saw no one coming out. After sunset, he sat himself down at the entrance of the cavern, and kept on watch until midnight. Then sleep overcame him. He was lying asleep with his head on Maymun's knee, when the latter suddenly awakened him. What is it? he asked. Oh, my master, said Maymun,
I have heard some noise in the cavern, and I saw the glimmer of light."
He rose at once, and looking attentively, he perceived indeed a light, towards which he went, and which guided him to a recess in the cavern. Having ordered the negro to wait for him while he was going to find out where it proceeded from, he took his sabre and penetrated deeper into the cavern. He discovered a subterranean vault, into which he descended. The road to it was nearly impracticable, on account of the stones which encumbered it. He contrived, however, after much trouble, to reach a kind of crevice, through which the light shone which he had perceived. Looking through it, he saw the Princess Zahra surrounded by about 100 virgins. They were in magnificent palace dug out in the heart of the mountain, splendidly furnished and resplendent with gold everywhere. The maidens were eating and drinking and enjoying the pleasures of the table. Abul Hajar said to himself, "Alas, I have no companion to assist me at this difficult moment." Under the influence of this reflection, he returned to his servant Maymun, and said to him, "Go to my brother before God, Abul Hayluj, and tell him to come here to me as quick as he can." The servant forthwith mounted upon his horse, and rode upon the remainder of the night. Of all his friends, Abul Hayluj was the one whom Abul Hajar liked best. He was the son of a vizier. This young man and Abul Hajar and the negro Maymun passed as the three strongest and most fearless men of their time, and no one ever succeeded in overcoming them in combat. When the negro Maymun came to his master's friend, and had told him what had happened, the latter said, "Certainly, we belong to God and shall return to him." Then he took his sabre, mounted his horse, and taking his favorite negro with him, made his way with Maymun to the cavern. Abul Hajar came out to meet him and bid him welcome, and having informed him of the love he bore for Zahra, he told him of his resolution to penetrate forcibly into the palace, of the circumstances under which he had taken refuge in the cavern, and the marvelous scene he had witnessed while there. Abul Hayluj was dumb with surprise. At nightfall they heard singing, boisterous laughter, and animated talking. Abul Hajar said to his friend, "Go to the end of the subterranean passage and look. You will then make excuse for the love of your brother." Abul Hayluj, stealing softly down to the lower end of the grotto, looked into the interior of the palace, and was enchanted to the sight of these virgins and their charms. "Oh brother," he asked, "which among these women is Zahra?" Abul Hajar answered, "The one with the irreproachable shape, whose smile is irresistible, whose cheeks are roses, and whose forehead is resplendently white, whose head is encircled by a crown of pearls, and whose garments sparkle with gold. She is seated on a throne encrusted with rare stones and nails of silver, and she is leaning her head upon her hind." "I have observed her of all the others," said Abul Hayluj, "as though she were a standard or a blazing torch. But, O my brother, let me draw your attention to a matter which appears not to have struck you." "What is it?" asked Abul Hajar. His friend replied, "It is very certain, O my brother, that licentiousness reigns in this place. Observe that these people come here only at night time, and that this is a retired place. There is every reason to believe that it is exclusively consecrated for feasting, drinking, and debauchery. And if it was your idea that you could have come to her you love by any other way than the one on which we are now, you would have found that you have deceived yourself, even if you had found means to communicate with her by the help of other people." "And why so?" asked Abul Hajar. "Because," said his friend, "as far as I can see, Zahra solicits the affection of young girls, which is a proof that she can have no inclination for men, nor be responsive to their love." "Oh, Abul Hayluj," said Abul Hajar, "I know the value of your judgment, and it is for that I have sent you. You know that I have never hesitated to follow your advice and counsel." "Oh my brother," said the son of the vizier, "if God had not guided you to this entrance of the palace, you would never have been able to approach Zahra. But from here, please God, we can find our way." Next morning at sunrise, they ordered their servants to make a breach in that place, and managed to get everything out of the way that could obstruct the passage. This done, they hid their horses in another cavern, safe from wild beasts and thieves. Then all the four, the two masters and the two servants, entered the cavern and penetrated into the palace, each one of them armed with sabre and buckler. Then they closed up again the breach, and restored its former appearance. Now they found themselves in the darkness, but Abu al-Hayluj, having struck a match, lighted one of the candles, and they began to explore the palace in every sense. It seemed to them the marvel of marvels. The furniture was magnificent. Everywhere there were beds and couches of all kinds, rich candelabra, splendid lustres, sumptuous carpets, and tables covered with dishes, fruits, and beverages. Then, when they had admired all these treasures, they went on examining the chambers, counting them. There was a great number of them, and in the last one they found a secret door, very small and of appearance, which attracted their attention. Abu al-Hayluj said, "This is probably the door which communicates with the palace. Come, O my brother, we will wait the things that are to come in one of these chambers." They took their position in a cabinet difficult of access, high up, and from which one could see without being seen. So they waited till night came on. At that moment the secret door opened, giving admission to a negress carrying a torch, who set alight all the lustres and candelabra, and arranged the beds, set the plates, placed all sorts of meats upon the tables, with cups and bottles, and perfumed the air with the sweetest scents. Soon afterwards the maidens made their appearance. Their gait denoted in the same time indifference and languor. They seated themselves upon the divans, and the negress offered them meat and drink. They ate, drank, and sang melodiously. Then the four men, seeing them giddy with wine, came down from their hiding places with their sabres in their hands, brandishing them over the heads of the maidens. They had first taken care to veil their faces with the upper part of their haik. "Who are these men," cried Zuhra, "who are invading our dwelling under the cover of the shades of the night? Have you risen out of the ground, or did you descend from the sky? And what do you want?"
"Coition," they answered.
"With whom?" asked Zuhra.
"With you, O apple of my eye,"
said Abu al-Hayja, advancing. Zahra said, "Who are you?"
"I am Abu al-Hayja."
"But how is it that you know me?"
"It is I who met you while out hunting at such and such a place."
"But what brought you hither?"
"The will of God the Highest."
At this answer Zahra was silent, and set herself to think of a means by which she could rid herself of these intruders. Now, among the virgins that were present there were several whose vulvas were like iron barred, and whom no one had been able to deflower. There was also present a woman called Muna, she who appeases the passion, who was insatiable as regard to coition. Zahra thought to herself, "It is only by stratagem I can get rid of these men. By means of these women I will set them tasks which they will be unable to accomplish as conditions for my consent." Then turning to Abu al-Hayja, she said to him, "You will not get possession of me unless you fulfill the conditions which I shall impose upon you." The four cavaliers at once consented to this without knowing them, and she continued, "But if you do not fulfill them, will you pledge your word that you will be my prisoners, and place yourself entirely at my disposition?"
We pledge our words," they answered. She made them take their oath that they would be faithful to their word, and then placing her hand in that of Abu al-Hayja, she said to him,
"As regards to you, I impose upon you the task of deflowering 80 virgins without ejaculating. Such is my will."
He answered, "I accept." She let him then enter a chamber where there were several kinds of beds, and sent to him the 80 virgins in succession. Abu al-Hayja deflowered them all, and so ravished in a single night the maidenhood of 80 young girls without ejaculating the smallest drop of sperm. This extraordinary vigour filled Zahra with astonishment, and likewise all those who were present. The princess, turning then to the negro Maymun, asked, "And this one, what is his name?" They said, "Maymun." "Your task shall be," said the princess, pointing to Muna, "to do this woman's business without resting for 50 consecutive days. You need not ejaculate unless you like, but if the excess of fatigue forces you to stop, you will not have fulfilled your obligation." They all cried out at the hardness of such a task, but Maymun protested and said, "I accept the condition, and I shall come out of it with honour." The fact was that this negro had an insatiable appetite for the coitus. Zahra told him to go with Muna to her chamber, impressing upon the latter to let her know if the negro should exhibit the slightest trace of fatigue.
"And you,"
"What is your name?" she asked the friend of Abul Hayja. "Abul Hayluj," he replied. "Well then, Abul Hayluj, what I require of you is to remain here in the presence of these women and virgins for 50 consecutive days with your member during this period always in erection during day and night." And she said to the fourth, "What is your name?" "Fillah," good fortune, was his answer. "Very well, Fillah," she said, "you will remain at our disposition for any services which we may have to demand of you." However, Zahra, in order to leave no motive for any excuse, and so that she might not be accused of bad faith, had asked them, first of all, what regiment they wished to follow during the period of their trial. Abul Hayja had asked only for one drink, excepting water, camel's milk with honey, and for nourishment chickpeas cooked with meat and abundance of onions. And by means of these aliments he did, by the permission of God, accomplish his remarkable exploit. Abul Hayluj demanded for his nourishment onions cooked with meat, and for drink the juice pressed out of pounded onions mixed with honey. Maymun, on his part, asked for yolks of eggs and bread. However, Abul Hayja claimed of Zuhra the favour of copulating with her on the strength of the fact that he had fulfilled his engagement. She answered him, "Oh, impossible! The condition which you have fulfilled is inseparable from those which your companions have to comply with. The agreement must be carried out in its entirety, and you will find me true to my promise. But if one amongst you should fail in his task, you will all be my prisoners by the will of God." Abul Hayja gave way in the face of this firm resolve, and sat amongst the girls and women, and ate and drank with them, whilst waiting for the conclusion of the tasks of his companions. At first, Zahra, feeling convinced that they would soon all be at her mercy, was all amiability and smiles. But when the 20th day had come, she began to show signs of distress, and on the 30th she could no longer restrain her tears. For on that day Abul Hayluj had finished his task, and having come out of it honourably, he took his seat by the side of his friend amongst the company, who continued to eat tranquilly and to drink abundantly. From that time the princess, who had now no other hope than in the failure of the negro Maymun, relied upon his becoming fatigued before he finished his work. She sent every day to Munna for information, who sent word that the negro's vigour was constantly increasing, and she began to despair, seeing already Abul Hayja and Abul Hayluj coming off as victors in their enterprises. One day she said to the two friends, "I have made inquiries about the negro, and Munna has let me know that he is exhausted with fatigue." At these words Abul Hayja cried, "In the name of God, if he does not carry out his task, aye, and if he does not go beyond it for 10 days longer, he shall die the vilest of deaths." But his zealous servant never during the period of 50 days took any rest in his work of copulation, and kept going on, besides, for 10 days longer, as ordered by his master. Munna, on her part, had the greatest satisfaction, as this feat had at last appeased her ardour for coition. Maymun, having remained victor, could then take his seat with his companions. Then said Abul Hayja to Zuhra, "See, we have fulfilled all the conditions you have imposed upon us. It is now for you to accord me the favours which, according to our agreement, were to be the price if we succeeded." "But it is too true," answered the princess, and she gave herself up to him, and he found her excelling the most excellent. As to the negro Maymun, he married Munna. Abul Hayluj chose amongst all the virgins the one he had found the most attractive. They all remained in the palace, giving themselves up to good cheer and all possible pleasures, until death put an end to their happy existence and dissolved their union. God be merciful to them as well as to all Muslimans. Amen. It is to this stop that the verses cited previously make allusion. I have given it here because it testifies to the efficacy of the dishes and the remedies, the use of which I have recommended for giving vigour for coition, and all learned men agree in acknowledging their salutary effects. There are still other beverages of excellent virtue. I will describe the following. Take 1 part of the juice pressed out of pounded onions, and mix it with 2 parts of purified honey. Heat the mixture over a fire until the onion juice has disappeared and the honey only remains. Then take the residue from the fire, let it get cool, and preserve it for use when wanted. Then mix the same 1 awqiyah with 3 awaq of water, and let chickpeas be macerated in this fluid for 1 day and 1 night. This beverage is to be partaken of during winter and on going to bed. Only a small quantity is to be taken, and only for 1 day. The member of him who has drunk of it will not give him much rest during the night that follows. As to the man who partakes of it for several consecutive days, he will constantly have his member rigid and upright without intermission. A man with an ardent temperament ought not to make use of it, as it may give him a fever. Nor should the medicine be used 3 days in succession, except by old or cold-tempered men. And lastly, it should not be resorted to in the summer. I certainly did wrong to put this book together, but you will pardon me, nor let me pray in vain. O God, award no punishment for this on Judgment Day, and thou, O reader, hear me conjure thee to say, so be it. End of section 13. Section 14 of the Perfumed Garden by Sheikh Nefzaoui, translated by Richard Burton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Alia Makki. Appendix to the autograph edition. To the reader. In the year of grace 1876, some amateurs who were passionately fond of Arabian literature combined for the purpose of reproducing by autographic process a number of copies of a French translation of a work written by the Sheikh Nefzaoui, which book had, by a lucky chance, fallen into their hands. Each brought to the undertaking such assistance as his special knowledge allowed, and it was thus that the tedious work was achieved by amateurs amidst obstacles which were calculated to abate the ardour of their enthusiasm. Thus, as the reader has doubtlessly already divined, it was not an individual but a concourse of individuals who, taking advantage of a union of favourable circumstances and facilities not of common occurrence, offered to their friends the first fruit of a work, interesting and of such rarity that to the present time very few had had the opportunity of reading it, while they could only gather their knowledge from incorrect manuscripts, unsophisticated efforts guided by the principle of the division of labour for the airing out of a great undertaking, that the appearance of this book is due. The editor, it is under this name that the Society JMPQ has been, is, and will be designated, is assured beforehand, notwithstanding the imperfection of his production, of the sympathies of his readers, who are all friends of his, or friends of his friends, and for whose benefit he has worked. For this reason he is not going to claim an indulgence which has been already extended to him. His wish is only to make clear to everybody the exact value and nature of the book which he is offering, and to make known on what foundations the work has been done, in how far the remarkable translation of M has been respected, and in short, what reliance may be placed in the title, translated from Arabic by M, Staff Officer. It is in fact important that there should be no misunderstanding on this point, and that the reader should not imagine that he holds an exact copy of that translation in his hands, for we confess that we have modified it, and we give these explanations in order to justify the alterations which were imposed by the attending circumstances. As far as we are aware, there have been made now only 2 proper translations of the work of Sheikh Nefzaoui. One, of which we have availed ourselves, is due, as is well known, to M, a fanatical and distinguished Arabophile. The latter we have the learned expansion of excellent translation which probably leave others far behind. Unfortunately, death interrupted the accomplishment of this work, and there was no one to continue it. Our intention, at the outset, was to reproduce simply the first of the aforenamed translations, making, however, such rectifications as were necessitated by gross mistakes in the orthography and in the French idiom by which the manuscript in our possession was disfigured. Our views did not go beyond that, but we had scarcely made any progress with the book when we found that it was impossible to keep the translation as it stood. Obvious omissions, mistaken renderings of the senses, originating no doubt with the faulty Arab text which the translator had at his disposal, and which were patent at first sight, imposed upon us the necessity of consulting other resources. We were thus induced to examine all the Arab manuscripts of the work which we could by any possibility obtain. 3 texts were to this end put under contribution. These treated of the same subjects in the same order, and presented the same succession of chapters, corresponding, however, in this respect, point by point, with the manuscript upon which our translator had to work. But while 2 of them gave a kind of abstract of the questions treated, the third, on the contrary, seemed to enlarge at pleasure upon every subject. We shall expatiate to some slight extent upon this last named text, since the study of it has enabled us to clear up a certain number of points upon which M, notwithstanding his conscientious researches, have been unable to throw sufficient light. The principal characteristics of this text, which is not exempt from gross mistakes, is the affectations of more cares as to style and the choice of expressions. It enters more into fastidious and frequently technical particulars, contains more quotations of verses, often be it marked inapplicable ones, and uses in certain circumstances filthy images, which seem to have had a particular attraction for the author. But as a compensation for these faults, it gives, instead of cold, dry explications, pictures which are often charming, wanting neither in poetry nor originality, nor in descriptive talent, nor even in a certain elevation of thought, and bearing an undeniable stamp of originality. We may cite as an example of the chapter of kisses, which is found neither in our translation nor in the other 2 texts which we have examined, and which we have borrowed. In our character as Gauls, we must not complain about the obscenities which are scattered about, as if on purpose to excite the grosser passions. But what we must deprecate are the tedious expansions, whole pages of verbiage, which disfigure the work, and are like the reverse of the medal. The author has felt this himself. As the conclusion of his work, he requested the reader to pardon him in consideration of the good intention which has guided his pen. In presence of the qualities of first rank which must be acknowledged to exist in a book, we should have preferred that it had not contained these defects. We should have liked, in one word, to see it more homogeneous and more earnest, and more particularly so if one considers that the circumstances which we are pointing out raise doubts as to the veritable origin of the new matters which have been discovered, and which might easily be taken for interpolations due to the fancy of one or more of the copyists through whose hands the work passed before we received it. Everyone knows, in fact, the grave inconveniences attaching to manuscripts, and the services rendered by the art of printing to science and literature by disposing of them. No copy leaves the hands of the copyist complete and perfect, particularly if the writer is an Arab, the least scrupulous of all. The Arab copyist not only involuntarily scatters about mistakes which are due to his ignorance and carelessness, but will not shrink from making corrections, modifications, and even additions according to his fancy. The literary reader himself, carried away by the charm of the subject, often annotates the text in the margin, inserts an anecdote or idea which is just current, or some puffed up medical recipe. All this, to the great detriment of its purity, finds its way into the body of the work through the hands of the next copyist. There is no doubt that the work of Sheikh Nefzaoui has suffered in this way. Our 3 texts and the one upon which the translator worked offer striking dissimilarities and of all kinds. although, by the way, one of the translations seemed to approach more nearly in style to the extended text of which we have spoken. But a question of another sort comes before us with that respect, which contains more than 4 times as much matter as the others. Is this the entire work of the Sheikh Nefzaoui, always bearing in mind the modification to which manuscripts are exposed, and does it so stand by itself as a work for the perusal of voluptuaries, while the others are only abridged copies for the use of the vulgar, serving them as an elementary treatise? Or might not be the product of numerous successive additions to the original work, by which, as we have already suggested, its bulk has been considerably increased? We have no hesitation in pronouncing in favor of the first of these hypotheses. In the record which the Shaykh gives of it, he says that this is the second work of the kind which he has composed, and that it is in fact only the first one, entitled The Torch of the World, considerably increased pursuance of the advice given him by the Vizier Muhammad Awan al-Zawawi. Might it not be possible that a third work, still more complete than the second, had been the outcome of the new studies of the author? Subjects of a particular speciality have certainly been treated in the work of which we speak. In looking at the notes which serve as the preface to this translation, we find reproaches addressed by the translator to the author because he has merely hinted at 2 questions of more than ordinary interest, viz. Tribady and paiderasty. Well, then the Shaykh would meet his critic triumphantly by appearing before him with the work in question. For the chapter, which constitutes by itself more than half of its volume, is the 21st, and bears the superscription, "The 21st and the last chapter of the book, treating of the utility of eggs and some other substances which favour coitus, of Tribady and the women who first conceived this description of voluptuousness, of paiderasty and matters concerned with it, of procuresses and the sundry ruses by which one may get possession of a woman, of facility, jokes, anecdotes, and several questions concerning coitus in general." What would be the surprise of the translator to find a community of views and sentiments existing between himself, a representative of modern civilization, and this Arab who lived more than 300 years ago? He would only express his regret for having entertained so bad an opinion of his master, for having believed for one moment in an omission on his part, and for having doubted his competency to deal with the various questions spoken of. Does not the discovery of a text so complete authorize us to admit the existence of 2 works, one elementary, the other learned? And might it not be a reason of a little remnant of bashfulness that the author has reserved for the 20th chapter, without any previous allusions, the remarkable subjects which we do not find hinted at in any other place? To put the question in this fashion is at the same time to solve it, and to solve it in the affirmative. That interminable chapter will not be a product of interpolations. It is too long and too serious a work to admit such a supposition. The little that we have seen of it seems to bear the stamp of a well-pronounced originality, and to be composed with too much method not to be the work, and entirely the work, of the master. One may be surprised that this text is so rare, but the answer is very simple. As the translator judiciously observes in his notice, the matters treated in the 21st chapter are of nature to startle many people. See, an Arab who practices in secret pederasty affects in public rigid and austere manners, while he discusses without constraint in his conversation everything that concerns the natural coitus. Thus you will easily understand that he would not wish to be suspected of reading such a book by which his reputation would be compromised in the eyes of his co-religionists, while he would without hesitation exhibit a book which treated of the coitus only. Another consideration, moreover, suffices completely to explain the rarity of the work. Its compass makes it very expensive, and the manuscript is not attainable by everybody on account of the high price it reaches. However, it may be as regard to the origin of the text, having the 3 documents in our possession, we have given careful revision to the translation of M. Each doubtful point has been the object of minute research, and has been generally cleared up by one or the other. When there were several acceptable versions, we chose that which was the most fit for the context, and many mutilated passages were restored. Nor were we afraid to make additions in borrowing from the extended text what appeared to us worthy of reproduction, and for the omission of which we should have been blamed by the reader. We were careful, however, not to overload the work and to introduce no new matter which would militate against the peculiar character of the original translation. It is partly for this last reason, and still more so because the work required for this undertaking surpassed our strength, that we could not bring to light, to our great regret, the treasures concealed in the 21st chapter, as well as a certain number of new tales not less acceptable than those which we have given, with which we have enriched the text. We must not conceal that, leaving out of sight these alterations, we have not scrupled to refine the phrases, round off the periods, correct the phraseology, and in short, to amend even the form of the translation, which in many instances left much to be desired. It was a matter of necessity that the perusal of the contents of the book should be made agreeable. Now, the translator, with the most praiseworthy intentions, had been too anxious to render the Arabic text, with its short jumbled sentences, as clear as possible, and had thus made the reading painfully laborious. Looking at some passages, it may even be supposed that he had only jotted them down, particularly towards the end, and had not been able, for some reason or other, to revise them until it was too late. The new matter introduced has compelled us to make modifications in the notes of the translator, and to add new notes for the better elucidation of the subjects which had not been treated before. We have been, with respect to these notes, as careful as we were with respect to the text, endeavoring to respect as much as possible the personal work of the translator. Now that the reader has all the necessary information about the French edition of the Sheikh Nefzaoui's work, he will permit us to make, in conclusion, a few remarks upon the ensemble of the book. There are found in it many passages which are not attractive. The extraordinary ideas displayed, for instance, those about medicines and concerning the meanings of dreams, clash too directly with modern thought, not to awaken the reader a feeling more of boredom than of pleasure. The work certainly encumbered with a quantity of matter which cannot but appear ridiculous in the eyes of the civilized modern reader, but we should not have been justified in weeding it out. We were bound to keep it as intact as we have received it from our translator. We have held with the Italian proverb traduttore traditore, that a work loses sufficient of its originality by being conveyed from its own tongue into another, and we hope that the plan we have adopted will meet with general approval. Those oddities are, moreover, instructive, as they make us acquainted with the manner and the character of the Arab under a peculiar aspect, and not only of the Arab who was contemporary with our author, but also the Arab of our own day. The latter is, in fact, not much more advanced than was the former, although our contact with the race becomes closer every day in Tunis, Morocco, Egypt, and other Muslim countries. They hold to their old medical prescriptions, have the same belief in divination, and honor the same mass of ridiculous notions in which sorcery and amulets play a large part, and which appear to us supremely absurd. At the same time, one may observe from the very passages which we here refer to that these people was not so averse as one might believe to witticism, for the pun kalimbo occupies an important position in the explanation of dreams, which the author has studied the chapters on the sexual organs, apparently for no particular reason, but no doubt to that idea that no matter of interest should be absent from his work. The reader will perhaps also find that probability is frequently sacrificed to imagination. This is a distinctive mark in Arabic literature, and our work could not otherwise but exhibit the faults inherent in the genius of this race, which revels in the love for the marvelous, and amongst whose chief literary productions are to be counted the 1001 Nights. But if these tales show such defaults very glaringly, they exhibit, on the other hand, charming qualities, simplicity, grace, delicacy, a mine of precious things which has been explored and made use of by many modern authors. We have pointed out in some notes the We had to pass over many with silence, and amongst them of the most striking, as for instance the case of the man expert in stratagems duped by his wife, which we found reproduced with all the perfect mastership of Balzac at the end of La Physiologie du Mourage. We will not pursue this sketch any further. If instead of commencing the book with a preface we have preferred to address the reader at the end, this was done in order not to impose our views upon him, and thus to stand between him and the work. Whether these additional lines will be read by him or not, we believe we have done our duty by informing him of the direction we gave to our work. We tried on one hand to prove the merits of the translator who furnished the basis of our labors, that is to say, the part which required the most science and duty, while on the other hand we desired our readers to know in how far his translation had to be recast. To the Arabophile who would wish to produce a better translation, the way is left open, and in perfecting the work he is free to uncover the unknown beauties of the 21st chapter to his admiring contemporaries.
End of section 14. End of The Perfumed Garden. Thank you for listening.